Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. As of 2022, around 80% of the United States lives in an urban environment. That's where most of the jobs are, especially the ones that pay well, and many people prefer the lifestyle that living in a city or large town can provide. However, as we've all seen over the past several years, major population centers can be some of the worst places to be when things go wrong. Having a high population density is the main reason for this, and many times it makes other problems much worse. So today we're going to talk about the dangers of being in a city during a disaster. When things go wrong, one of the biggest problems you'll face in an urban environment is other people. I've worked in several different environments over the past 17 years or so, and one of the most important lessons I learned was more people, more problems. While there are a lot of good people out there, there's also a lot of vindictive and self-serving folks as well. That's one reason why I've worked so hard to become self-employed. But during a disaster, people's dark sides will come out as they become more stressed and desperate. Even good people can do some pretty awful things when their back is against the wall or their family is at risk. Then you can be sure that people who are already self-serving and backstabby will only get worse. 2020 was a perfect illustration of how bad situations can push people to the point where they lash out, sometimes violently. In a city, this will be hard to avoid totally, and you could just be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe it's a random mugger or a bunch of ticked off folks just happening to be burning down the part of town where your home or business is. Then it could also be someone who needs basics like food, water, medicine to keep themselves or their loved ones alive. There's also people out there who will prey on others and see the situation as a way to get away with it. Large cities tend to be breeding grounds for organized crime, which you can be sure will only become worse when things go wrong. So, if you find yourself in an urban environment during a disaster, pay close attention to what's going on around you. Keep your eyes open, gather as much information as you can, and also exercise good OPSEC. Do your best to blend in and be the gray man as much as possible. Then also have the ability to defend yourself if necessary. About a month or so ago, I got a comment suggesting that I watch Britain Blackout, which is basically the across the pond version of American Blackout. In it, the Prepper family did a horrible job exercising OPSEC. They cooked out in the open during the middle of the day, which of course attracted hungry people to their home. Then their little son blabbed that they had a generator, and as you can imagine, it was all downhill from there. People came back, beat the mess out of the dad, and then took all their supplies. Then, out of desperation, Prepper Dad went into a grocery store to scavenge supplies, and I won't ruin that part for you, but I will say that the ending actually bothered me a little bit, which is saying something considering how many shows like that I've watched over the years. So always be careful about how you use your preps to prevent other people from knowing that you have them, and then of course have the tools and skills needed to defend them if necessary. Then another side to the human response to a disaster is what the government does. Most of the time, larger cities tend to be run by politicians who favor control and the quote, greater good over individual rights. That's why certain cities remain on lockdown longer than others, and as a result, many folks have fled from them in the years since. Unfortunately, this pattern of control repeats itself time and time again in these major cities. For example, when things go south, many times they'll try to do unconstitutional orders restricting the right to personal defense, even though they know full well that they can't protect everybody. We saw this in New Orleans in 2005 and to a lesser degree in New Mexico last year. In all honesty, many of these folks are just looking for an excuse. Another major issue people in cities will experience during a disaster is a lack of resources. If you've been to a major American city, chances are you've seen a lot of concrete. Tall buildings crammed with people and very little green. Sure, most cities have parks, but very few of them are used for food production, even on a small scale. But even if they were repurposed for that, it wouldn't be enough land to grow food for everyone. Then, even though a lot of cities are close to a body of water, it would still need to be treated. For cities that lie along rivers or large freshwater lakes, this may be doable at least on an individual level, but cities that have mostly salt water nearby would be in serious trouble. The bottom line is that our cities rely on worldwide supply chains to provide food, medications, and other vital supplies. Sometimes even water's piped in from dozens or hundreds of miles away. If we were to experience a major event such as an EMP, massive cyber attack, or even a serious natural disaster, the ability to provide urban areas with resources would be greatly diminished. And because of their large populations, getting everyone what they need would be virtually impossible. There's just no way that modern cities can support the people living in them without modern logistics and utilities. Another issue you'll face if you're in a city during a disaster is traffic jams. I've driven through most of the major cities in Texas, and all of them have absolutely horrendous traffic. All it takes is one car breaking down for traffic to get backed up for miles, even on a normal day where nothing else is wrong. People aren't panicking because there's a storm headed the way or an alien mothership about to touch down. A Volkswagen Beetle just broke down while everybody was trying to get home. However, if there was actually something going on, it would be a lot worse. People who are stressed and trying to get to safety will inevitably drive like idiots and cause accidents, which will gum up roadways. That's in addition to cars that'll clog things up just by breaking down, and yes, that will increase too since there will be more cars on the road. So, if you live in a major city and can't move for one reason or another, be sure to stay on top of current events so you and your loved ones can be some of the first people out of town, because if you're not, there's a chance you may not make it out at all. Then people who rely on public transportation will be in an even worse situation. If the doodle hits the poodle, buses probably won't be running, and even if they aren't the easiest things to navigate around stalled or wrecked cars. If there happens to be a coordinated evacuation, all you could do is just hope that you find a seat. Another big problem that comes with living in an urban environment is how easily disease spreads, and this is due to the aforementioned high population density. During relatively normal times, this could be just like outbreaks of the flu or stomach bugs. I got one of those at a conference in San Antonio back in 2016. Really wish I hadn't had salmon the night before. But the same would also be true if something more serious were to develop, like avian flu. Then our water supply would be another point of concern. Floods can cause wastewater to go all sorts of places that shouldn't, and when you combine that with the fact that water treatment facilities will probably be offline, drinking any water that you find outside your home could be very dangerous. Even if you have running water for a little while after the event starts, it should still be boiled since contaminants can seep into the pipes through the ground. If you live along a lake, stream, or river, there's a good chance that people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing will dump their waste into that body of water and contaminate it. So, if you live in a city, be sure that your water purification plant accounts for viral contaminants. Many popular water filters like Sawyer's only remove bacteria and protozoa, and recent events prevent me from trusting a Berkey totally. For my family, I run my water through a pellet case to remove any larger debris, then use a Sawyer to remove sediment. After that, I'll use a camp stove or rocket stove to boil the water to remove any remaining biological contaminants, including viruses, and then I'll run it through a Berkey or some other system with activated charcoal to remove chemicals. Another way disease would spread is through a breakdown in sanitation infrastructure. Even though most of us don't think about it, household waste, if not taken care of, can attract flies, rats, and other creatures that are known to spread disease. And since they would have a much larger food supply than normal, their populations would skyrocket, making the situation worse. So be sure to have a waste management plan for your family that includes ways to deal with both household and human waste. Then, beyond biological hazards, cities are also filled with all sorts of harmful substances that could be released if something goes wrong. A moment ago, I mentioned how floods could cause wastewater to contaminate our water supply, and the same thing can happen with chemicals as well, especially if you live near an industrial area. Chemicals can also become airborne if their containment structures become damaged. For example, a few years back we had an ammonia leak at a local industrial complex. I'm not really sure what caused it, but as a result, several homes in a large apartment complex had to be evacuated. There was even a park nearby that had to be demolished since it was no longer considered safe to use after that occurred. Natural disasters like earthquakes and tornadoes can also cause harmful substances to be released. In addition to the possibility that they could damage industrial facilities, even the destruction of homes and other buildings can cause issues. When buildings collapse, dust and debris will be thrown into the air, and a lot of what we use to build those isn't really all that good to breathe in. For example, numerous homes and businesses still have asbestos in them. Even though it's been illegal for decades, up to 20% of commercial buildings in the United States still have it. A half-face respirator like this one will do a decent job protecting you from most airborne contaminants, and a gas mask will remove even more, and also have the added benefit of protecting your eyes. Another issue with living in a major city is that they face threats that less populated areas usually don't. This could be from a foreign country during times of war, but as we've all seen, all it takes is a few ideologically driven idiots or one antisocial loser to cause serious problems for people. Now, I'm not saying that bad things can't happen in a small town, because they absolutely do, but they're more likely to happen in areas where there's lots of people. Then, during actual wartime, large cities tend to have things like energy infrastructure and military bases that would make them targets. Facilities with strategic importance, meaning anything that could support a country during nuclear war, would be at the top of the list. That includes command and control hubs, bases to house bomber aircraft, and those that support submarines. On the civilian side, it could be a large oil refinery, a nuclear power plant, or even a big airport. Another issue with being in an urban environment during a disaster is that police, firefighters, and paramedics will be very limited in their ability to respond. Due to how many people are involved and how large cities tend to be geographically, there's no way that they'll be able to respond to everything, and the same will be true even when relief organizations and other outside help eventually arrives. We've seen time and time again how first responders, relief organizations, and even the National Guard and federal government are hopelessly overwhelmed during a disaster. The bottom line is, even though there's a lot of people out there who may want to help, there will only be so much that they can do, especially during the opening stages. So, because of that, we have to be ready to take care of ourselves and our loved ones, have all the basics that we talk about here, like food, water, and medications, and be aware of what's going on in the world around you. This will allow you to make the best decisions possible before and during a disaster, but you also have to be willing to act when it's time to do so. Now, how you respond to a disaster in an urban environment will depend on your own unique personal situation. My advice would be to get out now, if at all possible, but I know that not everybody can do that. Maybe it's your job, or you have to take care of family members who need access to advanced medical care, so I totally get that. But if you want to learn more about what you need to do to bug out effectively, then click here, or if you want to see what you need to bug in, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.